First of all, again, welcome to all of you. I guess we are a small number of people, so we can keep our videos on if you like. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Tirtham Deb and Convergence 2021 for organizing this topical discussion on the Bangladesh's startup ecosystem, specifically how we can reboot the startup ecosystem vis-a-vis COVID situation. So what I will do is, I will go around the table, virtual table, and call upon each one of you to respond to the post-COVID. Well, actually, it's an emerging COVID situation, emerging COVID or pandemic situation, the issues concerning the ecosystem. So first of all, let me introduce my distinguished panelists. We have, three luminaries of the startup entrepreneurial ecosystem of Bangladesh. First of all, Mr. Syed Almas Kabir, the president of the Bangladesh Association of Software and Information Services, the national trade organization for software and IT service companies in Bangladesh, which has nearly 2,000 members as of today. And he is also the founder and CEO of one of the largest network service providers called Metronet. And we have with us Ms. Maliha Qadir. She is the founder and managing director of Shohoj, which is a conglomeration of a number of online services, from ticketing to ride hailing and other e-commerce services. I'm sure she will go into those details. Her background is that she has been with Stanchart and Bracknet and others before she founded Shohoj, and she comes with a distinguished academic background of MBA from Harvard. Then we have Mr. Mustafizur Khan. He is the founder and CEO of startup Dhaka and also Upskill, another online platform. He also happens to be a founder partner of IDLC Venture Capital Fund One, and also an investor and director of Light Castle Partners. And he is also instrumental in the startup accelerator initiated by Grameenphone, the largest phone operator of the country. He has an MBA from Nanyang and also has worked with HSBC and other international organizations before moving to the startup ecosystem here in Bangladesh. So as I said, we have really distinguished and qualified startup entrepreneurial personalities from Bangladesh. So what I would like to do in terms of the startup ecosystem in Bangladesh, give you a very brief lay of the land so that listeners can understand where we are coming from. So Bangladesh was slightly behind the curve in the startup ecosystem compared to India and other countries in China, such as other countries in Asia, such as China, Vietnam, and others. But despite that late start, Bangladesh already has a few mega stars in the startup ecosystem, such as Pathao, the ride-hailing service, ShopUp, the Facebook e-commerce facilitator, Shohoj, I already talked about that, Sheba, the online service aggregator, Chaldal, the online grocery delivery service, Bikash, the largest, mobile money transfer service, Hungry Naki, eValley, and many others. What is important is to understand that even though we were late to the party, but today there are dozens of highly successful startups in Bangladesh, and even the government is pushing very hard to make this ecosystem have a sound footing. So government's own venture capital funding arm, started by the ICT ministry, called Startup Bangladesh under the IDEA project, that has already funded more than 170 startups in Bangladesh. And amazingly, even though globally the startup success factor or ratio is less than 5%, some say even less than 1%. But in our case, we are seeing that out of these 173 or so startups that we have funded, more than 50% are still functioning. And this is a 230 crore taka project. And there are also many other national as well as international venture capital investment companies working in Bangladesh. There is also a very active angel network in Bangladesh called Bangladesh Angel Network. So overall, it's a ecosystem that is thriving and getting bigger by the day. So, and some of these startups have already reached unicorn status, and more are expected to reach unicorn status within a year or two. But the onset of the pandemic from March last year has been a dampener in that process. We have had two very scary waves of infection surges, and leading to widespread lockdowns and forcing us to rethink the conventional trade and commerce, not only around the world, but also locally in Bangladesh. But having said that, we are also aware of the fact that Bangladesh is one of the few countries that, despite the pandemic, the scourge of the pandemic, we have been able to maintain a plus 5% growth rate both last year and this year. So in that backdrop, I would like to come to Almas first, the president of the Bangladesh Association of Software and Information Services. And I would like to know from him, how has the pandemic affected the startup economy in Bangladesh? What's your view from your vantage point?
Thank you, Karim Bhai. Thank you, everybody. Very good evening from Dhaka. Of course, the COVID pandemic has been devastating for the entire business world, all over the world. And Bangladesh is, of course, no exception. Especially the startups, the small companies, the companies who are actually very young, maybe less than 3-year or less than 5-year-old, who are still struggling to reach a break-even point. Those who are still in the investment mode, they have been the most, hit hard, actually. They have been hurt very badly. Of course, because everybody was very cautious about investment, everybody was very cautious about spending money. And that is why these startups, what they had in mind, the strategies they had before the pandemic, those strategies did not match their business plan. And obviously, many of them who could not adapt, or maybe in some cases pivot, they were they suffered most, I should say. Some we have seen that some have pivoted. They have changed their strategies, and or they have expanded their offerings, and this is how they could earn some extra revenue. The IT industry in particular was also very badly hit because the IT companies and many of these startups are in this IT sector. Most of these IT companies, they actually cater to other industries like banks or like RMG industry, like those. So those other industries, they were shut down, or they were very later on when after the lockdown, the initial lockdowns last year, when they resumed their businesses, they were very, again, as I was saying, very cautious about spending. And naturally, most of these, I should not say naturally, but unfortunately rather, they thought that IT would be their, in a lesser priority. They put IT in a lesser priority, and so they started, or rather stopped investing in IT and software and spending on IT services. So naturally, these startups who are in this IT sector, they were very badly hit. Another big problem was that we know that the biggest challenge for any startup, be it pandemic, I mean, even before the pandemic, it is the lack of, or rather very, I should say, it's very difficult to access finance. The finance or investment is very crucial for startups. So that has always been very difficult for the startups, especially in Bangladesh, because the ecosystem that we have, or rather the ecosystem that is being developed right now, like Karim Bhai has mentioned about Startup Bangladesh and other angel networks and other venture capital companies. So these are very new. I mean, and they are still, again, also very cautious, and they are funding only to those startups that have some, experience. They the ones that have some revenue in the last couple of years. So those are the startups who have been getting the attention of these investors. But the startups who are in the very initial stage, maybe they're a year old or maybe even a less than a year old, they have been facing finance and investment. And in the COVID situation made it even harder. We all know that the government announced a few stimulus packages, but none of these startups could access these stimulus packages. Even many established companies, I mean, when I say established, I mean like 5-6-year-old companies, they also could not access this stimulus package that the government announced. So these were the problems. Why they could not access, maybe we can discuss later, but they could not. So this is, I think, this was a very bad time for these startups. And many of these startups, they have shut down their shops. And of course, our topic today, that how we can reboot them. I believe that Mustafiz or Maliha, they will give their inputs. I really want to listen to them. And from basis, we have been trying to help these young companies, the companies that we have under our umbrella, companies who are less than 5-year-old. For them, we have created a growth ecosystem, which has this, financing or legal support, capacity building, also mentoring. So we have that. I'll share about that in growth ecosystem also when I get to speak later.
Okay, no, thank you, Almas. My only quick question, follow-up question to you before I go to Maliha would be, amongst the basis members, so you have nearly 2,000 members.
1,600.
How many? Yeah. So how many actually have closed shops? How many have completely stopped functioning as a company since the onslaught of the pandemic? Do you have any data on that? I mean, is it 5% of your membership, 1% of your membership? What is your feel for that, or where do you stand on that?
Okay, so right now we are actually in the middle of a survey. That the survey is going on for exactly because asking for these type of questions. We will be able to share that information maybe around sometime a week later. But our estimate says that it is much more than 5%, and definitely many of the member companies have shrunk their human resources and also office spaces by around 50%. So
Okay, all right.
that is also alarming.
Okay, all right, that is alarming. Yes, not only that, that some of the companies have completely closed shop, but even those that are continuing, they're continuing at half capacity or less. So having said that, let me come to Maliha. So, a lot of people, outside of the IT industry, they think that, the pandemic is a boon to the IT industry, that it should help our business. It should help, our business grow in a booming fashion. But from what we have just heard from the basis president, clearly that is not the case. So, but where do you think, IT companies actually benefited from the pandemic? And where do you think IT companies lost out in the pandemic? So, for example, your own company, that does bus ticketing or event ticketing, you do ride hailing, you do those kind of services, and obviously lockdowns don't help that kind of business. So what's your view on this? Has the pandemic helped business, or has it actually cut down on business?
Yeah. Thank you, Habibullah Bhai, and Almas Bhai had really nailed some very important points, which reflects the startup ecosystem. So the pandemic has helped in payment digitization quite a bit. I saw the kind of volume of digital payments happening in Bangladesh. So people who are in that area, the MFS companies, plus payment gateways and all, I think they have benefited from the pandemic. Grocery has benefited from the pandemic because quite before the pandemic, Chaldal was publicly sharing some data in a talk. Their volumes have really gone up from what it used to be before the pandemic to what it is now. It's quite natural. It has happened globally as well. So these two sectors, to my knowledge, have done well. Travel certainly hasn't done well. Ride hailing and travel has been off for long distance travel has been off for 6 months, was off for 6 months. 2020, and now also it just started, was off for another 3 months. That has hurt us very badly. And it was also, and there's social distancing within the buses now, right? So there's half the inventory is gone.
Right.
People are also scared. In ride hailing, social distancing is very difficult, so people are scared. So that market has been very badly impacted. Quite naturally, ride hailing and travel has been very badly impacted. Food delivery globally has gone up, but to my knowledge, not so much in India and Bangladesh. South Asia, I would say in general, because there's a different dynamic happening in our countries, which is there are supply side issues. Delivery man are not here. Restaurants are not being able to operate properly because of all kinds of kitchen staff issues. And people are really more worried about hygiene than you see in Western markets, where there's a certain level of trust that exists in the system, following the rules, which is not so much in South Asia. So you'd see in South Asia, to my knowledge again, food delivery hasn't increased during the pandemic. It has stayed the same, I would say. So that's for, I guess, for travel, for grocery and food delivery. B2B space, I would think, is doing well because payments are getting digitized. People are coming online and doing more and more things digitally. So it really depends on which part of the industry you are in. Overall, in general, what Almas Bhai was saying is, startups particularly, more than IT companies, as in software developers, we are impacted by funding. And last year, see, what we see now is, I have been raising money in Bangladesh market for 8 years. We have raised money from around more than 10 VCs globally. So to many investors. What I see now is that there's a very nice trend that startups are being able to raise money, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. These kind of small funding rounds are happening, right? But the proof of the pudding is that some of us are up for Series B. which is a 20 to 30 million dollar range. And that nobody in Bangladesh has done yet.
Okay.
And it makes it difficult when a fund is writing a bigger check. The VCs want to make sure that they have at least visited the country before. In case of Bangladesh, particularly because of image issues or whatever you may, they don't want to write a check without having ever visited Bangladesh in their lifetime. So that makes it difficult, which is why last year many of us kind of did a shorter round and postponed our Series B. And I think this year or next year, some of us will be raising Series B. So that will really be so they talk about it in Southeast Asia as well, which is a much more matured market, that there's a Series B crisis in Southeast Asia. That sweet spot. There are very large funds, there are the very smaller ones, the middle one, the Series B is tricky. So Bangladesh, you can imagine, is really, nobody's done it yet. So that, that we will see. Few of us, I'm sure, will raise. And that will be I guess, one-step maturity of the system. I think what has happened in Bangladesh is that the market is very young, and some of us have matured to Series B stage, but the market overall is seen by investors as okay, I'll write a $2 to $3 billion check for Bangladesh, a new market, right? But some of us are much bigger and up for a bigger check. So we'll see that. So generally, it depends on which part of the industry you are in. I would say payments, fintech, and the obvious grocery and all has grown. The rest, at the best, have stayed the same, and funding remains to be a challenge. COVID times, but hopefully we'll hear some good news this year or next year.
Okay, so you have made some really good points that for taking off. The Bangladesh ecosystem, startup ecosystem needs to hit that sweet spot in Series B funding before they move on to even larger pastures of Series C and beyond. So, and that's where we are having some difficulties because, VCs cannot visit Bangladesh, see for themselves what's happening here. Those are real challenges. So with that perspective, now I would like to come to Mustafizur Khan. And what I would like to know from you, that despite all these challenges, it is also true, as I have mentioned in my introductory remarks, that Bangladesh has shown real resilience to this pandemic onslaught since last year. Bangladesh is probably the only country or one of the very few countries that have maintained 5% plus growth rate despite the pandemic damages or economic damages that has happened outside Bangladesh as well as inside Bangladesh. So having said that, and you have been part of both Startup Dhaka, the startup ecosystem facilitator, as well as you yourself have been a founder of a startup upscale, and you are also working with what is it called? Lighthouse Partners, right? So they also help with the startup ecosystem with their studies and all of that, and advisory services. So from your vantage point, how do you see we can overcome these challenges that Maliha has just thrown at us? Overcoming this Series B crisis that will allow the startups to move up scale and really become unicorns, which should be our destiny because we have done so well up to this point.
Thank you, Habibullah, sir. It's a tough question. I'll try to crack it, but I don't think I will be able to answer with your satisfaction. But I'll give it a shot. I will start with some stats. Like us partners, they did a survey last year in April, and they surveyed about 200 startups. And some of the figures that came is 24% businesses stopped complete operation right after COVID of the startups. 56% of the startups saw a 50% drop in their revenue. 56%. And then 86% of the e-commerce business saw a drop in the revenue. And then 60% of the startups had less than 3 months of runway. That means they didn't have enough capital to continue beyond 3 months. So these are like, these are what the market kind of said. In terms of, I think Maliha mentioned a couple of the categories. Despite this category, the shortfall, some of the categories that kind of flourished, especially the essential sectors. Grocery, they saw 100% growth across the board. Fintech is the second one, and logistics, especially to sustain the supply chain. So these are the three broad categories saw positive impact, but across the board, all other industries kind of have a negative impact. In terms of going to the questions, in terms of how can we survive, I don't think there's a short-term answer to this. We have to look at long-term, because if you look at the whole the finance, it's a supply chain. So angel investors will invest early. They will hand it over to VCs, company like ourselves, and then we will exit to private equity, or if companies have IPO, those investors will take an exit. But the fundamental problem right now is one is Maliha probably mentioned this often, is that nobody knows Bangladesh. But recently we have seen that some of the large media like Bloomberg, they're writing this strong investigative report about how Bangladesh economy is rising. But I think we are still not in the radar, especially on the VC community. We are just not there. Well, the fund that exists, the mandates doesn't even count Bangladesh as a country to invest in. So in a fundamental level, we are not in the radar. So what do we do? In those cases, before these people start taking notice, I firmly believe that we have to kind of take control on mitigate some of the issues. So for example, if we say small cap index, I think the government is trying to work around this. Basis is also working on around this. Our VC association is trying to address this. So if we find an alternate way of finding exits for local startups, that will actually answer a lot of this question of exit opportunities, like how do we exit? Because that's the first question. Two questions investors ask, the international investors. You have to invest outside of Bangladesh. That means you have to register outside of Bangladesh. So there is a Bangladesh issues here, Bangladesh Bank ruling here that it's not easy to invest outside of Bangladesh. So there's some issues there. So that's one. And second is that we don't have exit stories. We don't have any exit stories yet. I think there are some partial exit, like BD Jobs had some equity.
Sold to Australian company.
Right. Bikash had some acquisition, a complete Hungry Naki had one exit, but I don't think the valuation was the correct value. That founders did not benefit at all. So I don't think we have had good exit stories yet, but that we can sell. So I think that is something that we have to create. So if we can't create exit stories for Bangladesh, it's a hard sell. So we have to find a way to create those, find a solution for the story. So the investors are interested to look into our market.
Okay, all right. Now, thank you. Those are very good points. But as Maliha was saying that there is appetite for small VC, funding in the Bangladesh market, Bangladesh ecosystem, 1 million to maybe several $1 million. But when it comes to Series B funding of, 10 million plus funding, that's where it seems that VC funding is not there yet. So do you think this could be an opportunity for local VC funds to step up to the plate and maybe, up their game and try to be a player in the Series B funding arrangements for such startups? Or could this be an opportunity, let's say, even for, VC funds, domestic VC funds in India or other South Asian neighbors who can come to Bangladesh and really take advantage of these opportunities in the local market. So I would like to come to you first, Mustafizur, on this. And basically, what I would like to hear from you, if this is something that local VC funds can do. And at the same time, while you address that, if you can also touch upon how the pandemic has forced a course correction in launching startups, even for small startups.
Okay,
Mustafizur, back to you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to answer the first one. Finance is a long-term play. There is no quick or shortcut. So when you talk about VC investment in Series B, I'll be very practical and frank. Maliha raised $50 million. My fund size is $5 million. So she actually raised 3 times my fund.
Okay.
So that means when we are starting out, and Ideal C VC Fund 1 is the first official, registered VC fund who actually raised publicly fund in the market.
Okay.
Other people who have registered, they have not really actually registered and start raising fund yet. So practically speaking, we don't have too many VCs, and even if they're launching fund, the fund sizes are not massive. I know there are some funds who have announced big numbers, but realistically, I don't think they have.
Okay. So we still have we have some way to go.
Long way to go. So long way to go.
All right. Okay. But the second question that I had, has the pandemic forced a course correction for launching startups?
Absolutely. Look, as a VC fund, we are not looking at certain categories at all. We are not going to look at them for maybe another 1 year, purely because we know that how, as you mentioned, there's the course correction happen. So the consumer is not going to spend in certain verticals at all. So it doesn't make sense to invest in a category that's not going to grow, very fast. And our funds, when we invest in companies, especially from a VC side, we look at growth. And by that metric, that will filter out a lot of these companies. Unfortunately for startups, VC companies will not even look at those early stage companies. So most of the responsibility will fall into the category of an institution like Startup Bangladesh for the government arm, who may don't have to think about the commercial return that much, but they can actually sustain and invest these companies. But companies like ours, we can't, because we have to think about our stakeholders, our fiduciary duty, and our investment return. So we can't play that role. It falls down to the government fundamentally, and angel investors who probably want to take a risk in a certain categories, despite what's happening right now. And we have seen certain angel investment coming through, especially in last 1 year. We have seen a lot of these early investment taking place from local angel investors. From $100,000 to $250,000.
Right. Those ticket sizes are usually around that, $50,000 to maybe a few $100,000.
Yeah.
So having said that, let me come to Maliha again. So, of course, your startup has seen some traction. You have been able to raise funds from regional venture capital funds. And so has some of the other more successful ones like Pathao or ShopUp and others. But do you see in this pandemic situation more startups or fewer startups due to the pandemic? What is your take on that?
Bangladeshis are inherently very entrepreneurial. So the entrepreneurial spirit is just, I'm amazed by it. And that has helped us grow. So startups will keep happening. People will starting something the first few years. It's small, it's a lot of work, but the amount of capital you need is not that much in that stage. It's when you become a bit bigger, that's when you need more and more capital, and it becomes more difficult from a fundraising perspective for a market like Bangladesh. So I don't think we'll see any less startup. We will see more and more startups happening. And I think that, maybe us entrepreneurs were inherently more optimistic. I feel like this will be the last year of Corona, or people will just take it as chickenpox or whatever else had happened in the past and move on with life. I mean, how much can you restrict people for how long? It's been a year. So things will start going back to normalcy, I feel like, by the end of this year from a travel perspective. VCs will also get used to it. Like, look, what is working for us is just around this time, Bangladesh has had its 50th birthday, and all these good media are coming out about Bangladesh. So
That's right.
I'm very hopeful that VCs will also get around to that and see it. Some startups will have to, change a bit of strategy, have some other kind of survival means. But I think by next year, we will be seeing a lot more good news and certainly more startups.
Wonderful. That's very good to know. One supplementary question to you before I go to Almas. That is, for the kind of VC round that you have done from regional VC funds of, let's say, $10 to $15 million, several local companies have done that already. So for this kind of funding rounds, do you see there is any opportunity, let's say, for local VC funds, especially, for example, the one promoted by the government, the ICT division's Startup Bangladesh Fund, which is a $30 million fund, and if the government wants to, they can make it even $300 million fund. I mean, a fund is $200-300 million is not going to be a problem for the government. But what is going to be a problem is they don't know the working model, how they can actually make it work in collaboration with global VC funds. Do you see any space in that area?
I mean, look, there's always an opportunity. Like you said, the government can make it a very big $200, $300, $400 million fund. So that's always possible. But, for us, so we have raised around $25 million, and we have raised from American, European, Chinese, and Southeast Asian VCs. To make Series B happen and the ecosystem mature, your suggestion is really good. The government should come forward for a bigger fund. The current step that was taken by Startup Bangladesh that happened, that's a very good initiative, but the check size is very, very, very small.
Very small, yes, exactly.
It doesn't do anything, right? For some of the bigger startups. So yes, the government can absolutely have a bigger check size and basically do matching fund. If we can bring money from a foreign investor, they can do a matching fund. That will also ensure that the fund is, the analytical rigor of a VC investment and all that has been followed through. It will be easier for the government to.
Exactly. Because that is something the government cannot master. This kind of, this requires very specialized domain knowledge, which the VCs can bring to the table, which can be quite helpful for the government. Now, thank you for that answer. So we also look forward to the government, and at least one thing that is good that is happening with the Startup Bangladesh initiative is that they are involving the industry. In fact, both the selection committee and the performance monitoring committee are run by industry personalities. So government is very keen to make that handshaking work.
Yeah.
So now I'll come to Almas on this issue that, because of the pandemic, yes, a lot of cash generating business has been hit hard. And, I know many basis companies are, crying hoarse because they cannot pay their salaries, they cannot meet their financial obligations, and they are also cannot take advantage of the stimulus packages that have been, announced by the government. So in this situation, how do you think the software and IT service industry players they can pivot to some degree and take advantage of the the social business developments that we are seeing around the world? So there are a lot of these funds which are not so stringent compared to purely profit driven funds. So do you see any opportunity there Bangladeshi startups or even established software and IT service companies to leverage CSR or humanitarian drives, those kind of work, because that can be greatly facilitated by online platforms. So any crowdfunding or crowdsourcing kind of platforms with the stamp of approval of basis or the government, or maybe even jointly. So any thoughts on that, Almas?
I'm not sure about the CSR or crowdfunding, but one thing is for sure that government can play a very big role here. You know very well that all the initiatives of the government to build this digital Bangladesh and the e-governance projects, the ongoing and the planned ones, they can generate a big revenue for the local industry. So if government can, prioritize and then, quickly, does all the procurement processes, finishes all the procurement processes and distribute the jobs among the industry players, the companies, I think that will be much more than enough for the entire industry that we have right now, and that will generate a lot of revenue for the industry. Just for an example, that we have just seen a very huge budget for ICT for the next financial year, which is actually more than 20% of the last year's that was announced. So, but unfortunately, we have not seen or there is no clear direction that this huge budget, where will this budget will go or will be spent, this money will be spent.
Right.
We have not seen that how the local industry, these companies will benefit from this huge budget. So that is the biggest problem. So I think the revenue for revenue generation, government is being the largest buyer in the country right now. Government can come forward and it will be a win-win situation for both the government. The local company will get the revenue. The government will be able to build the digital Bangladesh of their dreams very, very quickly. So I think that is one thing. Another thing, I just want to take you from your previous remark about Startup Bangladesh. And so Startup Bangladesh, by the way, is a independent company. So the one where the industry is involved is not a Startup Bangladesh anymore. It's called the Idea Project. Startup Bangladesh, on the other hand, is run by its own board, where actually there is no representation from the industry. So that is one thing we must think about, because this company, a limited company, cannot be run by the secretaries and the bureaucrats. So that is one thing. So another thing is, I am quite disappointed with Startup Bangladesh's performance so far. They have, this being not a government platform, I really want to be very candid. And the investment that we have very recently seen from Startup Bangladesh, I think they have invested on like seven companies, 7 startups or something like that, 7 or 10, I'm not sure. But all of them are like, all these startups, they already had generated Series A, and they are actually looking for Series B investment. So I really thought that was just an eyewash. So I am quite disappointed, and I am really not very optimistic with Startup Bangladesh's in the coming future, because we have in the past, we have seen the performance of the ESF fund. You know it very well. That was actually an equity fund. That was like a venture capital fund, but that did not take off. That was not successful. So I'm also not very optimistic about Startup Bangladesh. But what government can do, as you have suggested before, and Maliha has also suggested, that if government can come up with matching funds, not looking very much into profitability, but just to help the startup ecosystem, the startup companies, with that mindset, the government should come and invest. And also the venture capital companies, the guideline for the venture capital companies, that has to be also, I think, looked into. There should be incentives for VC fund. There should be tax break for VCs. So these are some incentives that we really should look into, and so that more and more we can get more and more VC fund in our country, both local and from outside the country.
Okay, no, thank you. The very good points made. I think there is still some confusion regarding the Startup Bangladesh naming of the thing, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the funding, the grant funding that is done, that is also done actually under Startup Bangladesh name.
That used to be, Karim bhai. That used to be Startup Bangladesh. Now it is called the Idea Project.
No, it was always under the Idea Project.
And the company, it is a separate company. It's a separate company called Startup Bangladesh Limited.
What you are referring to is the company part. So company part, yes, you are right that there is very little representation from the industry.
There is no representation.
No, there is one. Wahid Sharif is on the board. He's probably the only one.
Okay.
but yeah, I take your point. I take your point. So that has to be there in the right spirit, so that this is done properly. So yeah, thank you for your very candid remarks. And yes, we are very disappointed in the performance of the EF fund, which was created at the proposal of basis, if you recall, back in 2000, in the year 2000. But unfortunately, that has not given much benefit to the IT industry because of their red tapes and overly bureaucratic process of sanctioning projects. So even many basis presidents have been on the selection boards of EF, but we could not speed up the process. It's just so pathetic. That is unfortunate. I think we are running out of time, so we'll have just time for maybe 2 minutes from each one of you. So what I will do, use this time to basically pick on your brains on, this whole dialogue about, this reboot of the startup ecosystem vis-a-vis the pandemic situation. So my last question to each one of you, I'll come to each one of you one by one, is, first of all, is a reboot necessary, or has the startup ecosystem struggled along despite the pandemic? Rather, it requires a different, trust, different policy support from the government, or different types of ecosystem players, which we are not seeing in sufficient numbers in the local market. So what are your thoughts on that? I'll come to Mustafiz first.
Yeah, I'm an optimist. When I came back in 2013, there was nothing called startup. And that's where I decided I saw a lot of potential and opportunities, and these people were working, these young kids, and that's where I decided to do this documentary called Startup Dhaka. And from there, where we are now, I had an idea that at some point I'll be in investment, and in 2020 we were able to do that. It took us about 7 years, but but we were there. So I think it starts with an idea, it starts with an intention, and it is our job to kind of make it happen. Nobody's going to come to Bangladesh and make it happen for us. We have to do it ourselves. So all the gaps and issues that we have talked about, this is our problem. This is, some problems probably will not get fixed immediately, but if we keep going at it, we will solve it at a certain point. So I will say that. The second thing is, COVID is a course correction. That it did two things. One is the acceleration of digital adoption in Bangladesh has done, I think, what took maybe 5 or 6 years, they did it in 1 year. So I think that's the only silver lining I see, that people are ordering online. They are, people, my kid who was doing online classes, the teachers who were probably much older, they were forced to take classes online, who never thought of doing teaching online, and we did it. So so there's certain verticals have been transformed, fundamentally. And for example, if I take the education sector as an example, once the COVID is over, so are we going to go completely offline 100%? doesn't make sense to go in a hybrid model for schools. For example, even if we do like out of 5 days, if we do 3 days of school offline and then 2 days of school online, that still has an impact of the reduce of traffic, and then people still continue this online education, because this is just starting, and we keep investing in the platforms and the content, it will grow. But if we kind of go back to the way things were working, then this whole transformation is going to stop. So I would say that some of the things that we adopted because of COVID, we have to keep continue investing and just not go back to the old ways. And that's
exactly
that's something that I would say that it's
wonderful. That's a very good message. That's a very good message, Mustafiz. Rather, we do not want a reboot. We would like to retain what we have achieved because of the pandemic or despite the pandemic, and we need to
build on it,
chipping away at that and build on that.
Yeah.
Beautiful message. I would like to come to Maliha on that next. Maliha,
I'll pick
your
up on
parting thoughts.
Yeah, I'll pick up on what Mustafiz was saying. I think in some areas, some small sectors of consumer tech, COVID has had a permanent good impact in Bangladesh, not everywhere. I'm not so hopeful that education sector will remain to be so digitized post when the schools open up. We started telemedicine service in the middle of COVID. It was really a COVID reaction. We didn't have plans to start early. And we had some good volume. We didn't market. We didn't have much money during COVID. But the volumes went down as soon as doctors started accepting patients to go. So I don't think digitization, the fintech volumes, the payment volumes we see and we keep on citing everywhere, many of those are basically POS machines, not really totally buying online.
Okay.
So we have to analyze the payment volume data we are seeing of how much is truly online, somebody going in and punching in a Visa or a MasterCard, as opposed to somebody going to the grocery store and using that there. Of course, there is some impact happening. People are getting things online. That is happening. Some has happened. But has it really had a big change in Bangladesh? I actually don't think so. And it's inherently because of lack of education in the entire country. Our education system is terrible. It's just one word, terrible. We don't produce educated people. Some institutions are excellent, and I love the kids I get from IBA, for example, right? But in general, the digital adaptation of the masses, I don't think we are there that we will adapt digital technology. How is digital technology adaptation happening in the world, not just Bangladesh, in the world? By giving VCs money, using VC money and giving discounts, buy cheap, come online, buy cheap, come online, right? So when that doesn't happen so much, of course, the COVID impact is there. Grocery, you didn't have a choice. Education, you didn't have a choice. The kid has to study from home. You didn't have a choice, right? But I'm aware of I'm on the board of the American School, where I see a fantastic digital education system. And I also have friends and family in the other schools where the education system is just using Zoom. So how much of that will continue to stay when the schools open up? I have my doubts. Maybe 1%, 2% impact will stay, but not so much. Yes, how much of digital buying grocery will continue after everything becomes normal and everybody's out there to party and all that? There will be a big impact. There will be. But when we say big, please understand the volumes we're talking about are very small to here. It's not big by global standards at all. So how much COVID has really helped Bangladesh in terms of taking towards digitization? In the consumer tech side, I'm not sure. However, what has happened is that the corporate world, the government, they have started using at least Zoom, Teams, all these kind of digital ways. Banks are doing factoring over email, digital invoices. That will have a big impact, but it's going to be a slow impact. It's not going to be from a timing perspective, it's not going to be a big boom happening next year in digital. No, it won't. Again, payments is a different thing we have to analyze more deeply. So government can do a lot. I actually am very much in favor of making digitization compulsory in certain areas. There is no reason why we can't pay for airtime by digital means, why we can't pay for utility bills for digital means. Bangladeshis will learn just like this if we make it compulsory that utility bills and mobile payments have to be made digitally. all tax payments have to be made digitally. I'm talking about payments first because that's kind of the underlying structure of everything. If you feel comfortable paying online, then you start buying your sardines and your food and whatnot as well. So that the government can do a lot over there in making digital payment compulsory. It will not only expedite digitization, but it will absolutely help in tax collection as well, which is the big topic always. So that plus your idea of government stepping forward with a bigger fund of looking at Series B will greatly help. The other good thing the government has done is it has started branding Bangladesh, which is absolutely essential for being able to raise money and all. So I think these initiatives all together, the government could help us a lot to take us there.
Okay, all right. So I think Maliha would very much like a command economy when it comes to taking consumers online. But I got your point.
No, that's an extreme. Yeah, please don't use that word. I'm totally in favor of democracy, but we government.
No, I got your point. But yes, there is a deficit in the consumer end of things. But it's not going to, but we must all also understand that consumers always like choices. So they may not like anything imposed on them, but I think there needs to be some nudging towards that process. So for any incentives given by the government would be great, as Mustafiz has pointed out, and Almas has also pointed out. And you're absolutely right. We need to see more, we need to see that needle move a little more at the consumer end of things. But at the corporate end and at the government end, things are moving. But we have to see how much of that is retained post-COVID situation. So we have to, wait till then to see how that goes. But there is also this assessment by many that, so I'll come to Almas on that. So for his parting thought, and also Almas, if you can, point out some of these issues, like all these online meetings that we are seeing happening, especially with government functionaries, policymakers. So even international policymakers, with international bodies like the UN, World Bank, ADB, and others. Do you see that trend going forward, remaining the same as we are seeing today? Or are we going to lose some of that digital work spirit? So your parting thoughts, Almas.
I think I am somewhere in between Mustafiz's optimism and Maliha's frustration. I'm somewhere in between. I do think that the COVID has been a blessing in disguise for the ICT industry, and it has taken us forward, like about maybe we have leapt for like 5 years, because a lot of awareness have grown, no doubt about it. But I also agree with what Maliha has been saying, that a lot of these will actually go back, including the online education and including the online meetings, as you have just asked. I'll give you an example. By the way, online education, that online classrooms that we have been seeing and we have been, talking in many media and meetings, this is only happening in the cities. Dhaka city, Chittagong, maybe some other district headquarters. But if you go to the suburbs, if you go to the village, rural areas, nobody can access online classrooms. There is a huge digital divide. And we have to accept those students are actually totally out of touch from their classrooms and from their teachers for the last so many months. So actually the situation is not what we see in Dhaka. So it is totally different. Just yesterday, there was the board meeting of the Apex business body. And today there was this press conference. And both occasions I requested there should be options for joining by Zoom, or joining online. There was none. So because I have been getting invitations in the government ministries, not ICT ministry. ICT ministry, being ICT ministry, is quite IT savvy, but in other ministries, they keep on insisting that the meeting has to be face-to-face, meeting has to be in person. So it is already there. People are getting Zoom fatigued, maybe, I don't know what, but they are actually already, they want to go back to the in-person meetings and all those things. And when I actually proposed in a very recent meeting that why not we do this online? And the secretary was telling me, no, I cannot do it. We cannot, have eye contacts and all these things like that. But anyway, having said all that, I'm still optimistic about it, about our journey towards our digital Bangladesh, our coveted digital Bangladesh, because COVID has definitely helped. COVID has actually made, like, I have never bought any grocery online, but I now actually buy at least 2 to 3 times a month online, at least 2 to maybe more. But this, I think, will help. But again, there has to be as you were saying about rebooting the startup ecosystem, yes, that definitely has to be done. We have to make the startups aware, or rather mentor, that should be the right word, mentor, and make them re-strategize, maybe pivot, and also how to approach the investors. That is very, very important. Whenever we have seen these startups, most of these startups going to an investor or make a pitch, most of the time they are actually not ready. They do not have a solid business plan. They do not have a clear idea, a clear vision. So those grooming has to be done. Those mentoring has to be done.
That's right.
And I think that will actually, boost the ecosystem and help the startups. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Almas. Thank you, Maliha, and thank you, Mustafiz, for your well thought out points. Yes, we see a lot of optimism. We also see a lot of frustration in the market, but that is all part of life, and that is all part of growing up, part of this whole emergence of new ecosystems and new business models. We talked about the startup ecosystem, but we haven't talked about some of the emerging technologies which are also going to have an impact on the ecosystem that we talked about for the last hour. But this has been very illuminating. I'm sure our audience would be highly illuminated on the startup ecosystem in Bangladesh. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And how outside investors should look at Bangladesh, or for that matter, even how local investors should look at the startup ecosystem, and how the startup entrepreneurs themselves should look at startup opportunities and and get over the challenges thrown at them by the pandemic, or for that matter, any other such challenges that come along the way. So thank you all for your thoughts on that. And I want to also thank Convergence 2021 for arranging this dialogue. This is of course, a continuing dialogue because for Bangladesh, the startup ecosystem is a very new ecosystem, but this ecosystem is already showing a lot of promise. And I'm sure we will see great things, happening within the next year or next 2-3 years. So where, let's say, some of the bigger players in South Asia were 4 or 5 years ago, Bangladesh will be in that situation probably in a year or 2. So it's a market with pregnant with possibilities, and we would like to see not only local players take advantage of that, but also global players take advantage of that. Government, academia, and industry commingle and collaborate with each other to really make this click. So thank you all very much. So you all have a great evening, and thank you for giving time for this program. Goodbye, and sign out from today's program.
Thank you very much.